Some years ago, when I was still pastoring in the Chicago area, I was driving a really old Chevy pickup truck. This exact model, except mine was blue and rust colored because mine was rust, not rust colored. Well, I noticed after a while the brakes started making this really awful, horrendous sound. And so I did what many drivers do. I completely ignored the sound that my brakes were making in hopes that it would go away. Don't judge me, because, right, you've done it. Well, after a little while, okay, it was actually after a very long time, it seemed to me that the sound was getting worse, not better. Go figure. And I did something that is never, ever a good idea, at least for me. I grabbed some tools out of my wife's toolbox, and I got a Chilton's manual, and some of you are blown away that I even know what that is, right? For really old, rusty Chevy pickup trucks, and I dove into a do-it-yourself brake job. Yeah, no, it's a bad idea. Anytime you see me with a tool in my hand, it's like, Kent, just put the tool down, back away, nobody gets hurt, right? So I took the drum thingies off the back wheel. Tony, what are those things called? Oh, the drum thingies are called drums. Okay. So I took the drum thingies off the back wheel, and when I did, like these huge chunks of rusty things fell out onto the ground. And I'm not joking. I remember thinking to myself, that can't be good. Right? That's my diagnostic skill on car stuff. And so I'm looking at the manual, looking at the rusty, chunky brake parts, like, no, throw away the book. And I did what any rational, reasonable people would do. I put the drum thingies back on the back wheel and just pretended everything was good and fine and fixed. I'm not making that up. I actually did that. And for those of you who are concerned, it wasn't completely foolish, because I knew that like 90%, 95% of the braking power is in the front wheels. It's not true. But I convinced myself of that. And truth be told, once I got those rusty parts out of the drum thingies, the sound was much better. So I think I actually did something good. All right. So I'm not making this up. The beginning of the next calendar, of course, we're in the state of Illinois at the time. They have annual vehicle inspections. I took it in, had to, and I'm not exaggerating, the state of Illinois literally condemned my pickup truck, And actually, for a whole bunch of reasons, they condemned it. And only as a minor footnote did the inspector add, and by the way, your rear brakes are completely shot. And I'm like, oh, that's strange. I have no idea how that happened. Right? So ignore it and it will go away. That's the lie we're talking about this morning in our The Lies We Believe message series. And I know I'm not the only person who has done this sort of thing, right? Anybody else want to fess up? All right. About 10 of you do, and 290 of you are lying. All right, we ignore warning lights on our dashboard, literally, of our cars, right? Ignore warning lights thinking the problem will go away. Derek, are you in here? I seem to think that just this past week something like that happened. All right. We ignore medical concerns thinking, oh, it's nothing, it'll go away. Do they go away? Yeah, sometimes they do, but rarely they don't. Listen to this. Men, do you know that prostate cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death among men? And most cases, it would have been completely treatable if the man just had simply not ignored the symptom. Right? So, boy, that turned heavy all of a sudden. We were like having fun and like, wow, never mind. So students, we ignore homework assignments thinking they'll go away. Do they go away when we ignore them? No, adults, we ignore work assignments. We ignore household repairs. We ignore taxes. All right, some of you are panicking. Oh, it's the 14th, right? They're due tomorrow. And are they going away just because we've ignored them? No, we ignore our credit card debt thinking, oh, it's just going to go away. Does it go away? I could go on. We ignore the flares that our spouse sends to us, that there are some matters in our marriage that need to be attended to. And when we ignore it, does it go away? It does not go away. We ignore behavioral problems or attitude problems with our children, thinking, oh, it'll just get better. Does it? No. We ignore persistent battles that we have, persistent battles that we lose in our own hearts, in our own minds, in our own struggles, in our own hang-ups, in our own addictions. Just if we pretend it's not there, it'll get better. Does it? It doesn't. Right, am I losing you guys, or are you just like, I'm not going to, right? We ignore tough conversations that we need to have with a friend, with a family member, with a coworker, thinking that if we don't step into it, it'll just fix itself. Do they fix themselves? No. All right. We even ignore just signals that our minds are overstressed, our bodies are overstressed, our hearts are redlining on the tachometer, thinking, if I just ignore the signals that my spirit and my body and my heart is sending me, I will get better. Do you? No. All right, so ignoring problems in the hope that it's going to go away is not just something Kent does with his brakes on his car. It's something we all do in almost every area of life at times. And so what I want to do, just to provide you an opportunity to get the most out of this message this morning, is I want you to take out the blue card that should have been on your chair. And on one side of the card, I want you to allow the Lord to bring to your mind a problem, a difficulty or struggle you've been ignoring and it's not going away. Make sense? Take the card out. You really do get to interact with your card through a pen. Go. Okay, with that in mind, let's take a look at this video.
If I ignore it, it'll go away. It'll slowly disappear. It'll begin to fade. I'll set it aside just for a bit so I can take a break from the weight of it. I'll put it in the closet and I'll shut the door so I no longer have to hear its roar. I'll cover it up, pretend it's not there, so I can breathe again, so I could pull in air. So I ignore it. And at first I feel fake, but I ignore that too, and I ignore the ache. And the longer I ignore it, the more numb I feel. But if I can ignore that, then maybe I can begin to deal with my life, my everyday, and the things that need done. And then maybe I can accomplish something, even if it's just one thing on my list, as long as I can ignore it. So I ignore it and I run one foot in front of the other, because if I can run, then I can hide. And maybe I won't get smothered by distractions and loneliness and sleepless nights, by the bills that aren't paid and the stupid little fights, the to-do lists that never end, the expectations not met, all of my failures, the here but not yet, the piles that grow on my desk, in my mind, in the corner, over there, yes, even online. The test scores that are too low, the things being said, the kids who won't listen that I'm in over my head. So I ignore it. And if I don't listen, I can't hear its words. And if I don't look, I don't see the mess it's made. And if I'm numb, I don't feel the pain. So I ignore it. So I won't let it control my life. I watch movies and I go out with friends. I go shopping and I get groceries and I do normal things. I go to work, talk with people. I read books. I go to school. I go to church. I listen to music. I scroll on my phone. I play empty games, because if I'm busy, it helps. I can get through the days. So I paste on a smile and I fake a laugh. I make plans and I dream dreams and I move on past that beast in my closet that strains to get out. See, I'm not stupid. I know what it's about. Hours go by and they fade into days, and soon I realize that I'm in a haze. It waits for my acknowledgement. It waits for my gaze, but it'll go away. It'll go away. It will go away. So I ignore it, but why am I the one trapped? This wasn't my plan. My breaths, they come harder, and this beast pulls me down. How can it weigh so much when it isn't around? It's gone. It has to be now. So I fake a smile, and I fake a laugh. I put one foot in front of the other, and I walk in a haze. Ignoring it has done nothing. It has not gone away.
Wow. Wow. So here's the question. Since we know, perhaps unwilling to admit, but since we know that ignoring problems doesn't actually cause them to go away by themselves, why do we still ignore them? All right? Thinking that they will, or believing they will, or tricking ourselves that they will go away. So here's an explanation for you to consider. We ignore problems when the payoff for ignoring the problem seems less than the price tag of addressing the problem. How's that feel? Does that feel pretty real? We ignore problems when the payoff for ignoring the problem seems less than the price tag of addressing the problem. So, for instance, we ignore the brakes on our car, we ignore the dashboard lights on our car because the payoff that we believe for ignoring the problem seems less than the price tag of actually having the problem looked at and fixed. Right? We ignore medical concerns because the payoff that we believe is there for just pretending that there's nothing wrong is less than the price tag of actually diagnosing what's wrong with us. We ignore homework assignments, we ignore work assignments, household repairs, taxes, credit card debt, because we think that the payoff of not paying attention to it is less than the price tag of pressing into it. We ignore the concerns, the flares that our spouse sends us about something that needs to be attended to in our marriage because the payoff for ignoring it is less than the price tag of actually talking about it. You get the idea, right? In his book, The Road Less Traveled, psychiatrist Scott Peck had this to say about price tags and payoffs. He said, fearing the pain involved. Say that, fearing the pain involved. Fearing the pain involved. Almost all of us, to a greater or lesser degree, attempt to avoid problems. We procrastinate, hoping they will go away. We ignore them. We forget them. We pretend they do not exist. And we attempt to get out of them rather than suffer through them. So why does Peck say we ignore problems, fooling ourselves that they'll go away? It's because we fear the pain involved in facing the problem head on is more, I guess we just fear the pain of addressing it. The pain of suffering with the problem seems less than the pain of facing the problem. And so that's why I'd like to suggest to you why we live out this lie that if I ignore it, it will go away. The payoff seems better than the price tag. And so what I want to do now is invite you to consider that problem you wrote down on the blue index card a few moments ago that you're ignoring, pretending, thinking it's going to go away. And I want you to take out the price tag that you had on your chair, and consider these questions. What is the payoff you're getting from ignoring the problem? What do you think you're actually getting out of ignoring it? 2, what are the price tags you're actually paying as a result of ignoring that problem? And then ask yourself the question, is the payoff worth the price tag? Take a few moments and jot that down on your price tag. All right, you can continue to interact with that price tag during the rest of the message. Here's a question for you to consider. I'm not going to ask anyone to hold up their hands, but if you just now completely ignored the opportunity to interact with a problem you're ignoring, I'd invite you to get curious about that. Why did I do that? Why did I ignore the thing I'm ignoring? What is the payoff for not pressing into it? Interesting. So if we're honest with ourselves, the price tags of ignoring problems, the price tags are almost always greater than the payoff for ignoring them. So here are some of the common price tags. Ignoring problems is costly on ourselves. It has a high personal price tag. So this is the truth we're all aware of, that the problems usually get worse, right? Not better when we ignore them, whether it's a medical problem, whether it's an issue we're facing in our hearts emotionally, whether it's something that's happening in our minds, whether it's an automotive problem, whether it's a relational problem, whether it's a household problem, right? They usually get worse, not better, when we ignore them, and it usually ends up costing us more in the long run, right? For having ignored them, right? That $30 repair becomes a $500 repair because we didn't step into it. And so the problems usually get worse. We know that's a price we pay. And moreover, during that season that we're ignoring the problem, that we're pretending it isn't there, we actually pay a high cost in our minds and our hearts and our bodies because we know it's not actually fixed, right? And it just gnaws. As you heard in the video, it just gnaws on our spirits. It gnaws on our emotions. It gnaws in our thoughts. It steals sleep from us because we know it's not actually going away. And so it's costly. It really is personally costly to ignore problems. Ignoring problems also has a high relational price tag. We often think that this choice to avoid relational problems is the choice of maintaining the peace. You know that one? I just don't want to step into the conversation. I just want to maintain the peace. I just want to keep the status quo. Right? But the truth of the matter is, when we sweep relational struggles, difficulties, problems under the proverbial carpet, they do not go away. They just don't stay under the carpet lying dormant. They actually grow. They become bigger. They grow worse. And bitterness grows, and resentment grows, and distance grows in the relationship, and intimacy breaks down, and closeness, and trust, and communication, all that breaks down. But we say to ourselves, oh, it's worth it. Right? Those relational price tags, we pretend, are less costly than the pain of whacking the hornet's nest. Right? It's not. It's not. All right, so ignoring relational problems is more costly than stepping into. Right? Same is true of parenting relationships. For many of us as parents, it can be easier for us to choose the payoff of ignoring problems with our children's attitudes, ignoring problems with our children's behaviors, rather than picking up the price tag of saying no to them, picking up the price tag of disciplining them, and hearing them say, I hate you. You are the worst parent on the planet. All right? Some of us, that seems more costly, but the truth of the matter is we will pick up those price tags later, and it's going to compound, right? And the ultimate price tag of ignoring the problems is that the child is going to grow into childhood spoiled, right? Or lacking confidence, incapable of facing life's difficulties, and constantly looking to other people to fix their problems, or constantly blaming other people for their problems. So the payoff, parents, is that we save ourselves the pain of confronting a problem in our children, but by ignoring the problem, we're actually just passing on a problem that's going to compound in interest over time. And it's going to get picked up in the child's future. And so ignoring problems has a high emotional price tag. And further, ignoring problems has a high spiritual price tag. With every problem that we ignore, with every time that God presents us with a gentle invitation to step into something He's putting His finger on in our hearts, in our attitudes, in our behaviors. Areas of sin, areas of self-protection, areas of deception. Every time we ignore those, we are making the choice to stagnate in our spiritual growth. We are making the choice. Every time we back away from a problem, we are making the choice to freeze in, to lock in at a point of growth emotionally, to freeze in our relational maturity. Do you understand that? We really are shooting ourselves in the foot, robbing ourselves of opportunities to mature when we walk away from them. And so ignoring problems, and you understand this, ignoring problems is more costly in the long run than the payoff of ignoring the problems. Show me a person who runs from their problems, and I will show you someone who has stopped growing in that particular growth point. I can tell you this as a pastor, when I meet with somebody who is wrestling with something in their emotional growth or in their relational growth and their spiritual growth, I can often pinpoint how old they were when this issue first came to a head in their lives, because you can tell relationally, you're 13 years old. You're 45 age, but you're 13 relationally. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to be mean-spirited in saying that. I'm just saying we freeze when we have an opportunity, to grow, to mature, and we say no to it. We freeze at that point in time. It's like our spirits, our hearts, our brains, every part of us develops in the same way that a muscle develops when it pushes through resistance, right? That's how we get stronger, as we push through the resistance. And I can tell you, show me a person who didn't push through a problem, to face it, to address it, and I'll show you someone whose character stopped growing muscle at that point of saying no. Does that make sense? Yeah. So on the other hand, show me a person who faces their problem, and I'll show you somebody who's maturing in every way and saving themselves a great deal of pain of letting this ignored problem compound. Because there was an old TV commercial, I think it was for like Fram oil filters. The guy would be like, "You can pay me now?" Remember that? "You can pay me later." It was like, hey, you can pay me to put your oil filter in now, or you can pay me to fix a blown engine later. Right? We can face our problems now, and it'll be this difficult. We can ignore them, and it'll be this big later. All right. So let's turn the corner to talk about the truth we should live in, not the lie we believe and the prices that we pay, but the truth. The Bible has a totally different perspective on our problems. Instead of ignore it and it will go away, the Bible tells us, face your problems and you will grow. Face your problems and you will grow. Now, do we have that on the next slide maybe? Yeah, let's read those top two lines out loud together with great conviction. Face problems and you will grow. Just show you I'm not making it up. Look at the words of James 1, verses 2 through 4. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters," say, that's me. Yeah, and not me, that's you. That's me. "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles," say troubles. All right, these are the kinds of things we ignore. "When troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity," say opportunity, "for great," what is the word? Joy. Oh, the Bible is just so inconvenient sometimes. We view difficulties as hassles to ignore, right? And God says that problems, that difficulties are opportunities to celebrate. Opportunities to celebrate. Is that crazy? All right, some of you have heard the teaching of Graham Cook. What does he say? He says something about this verse like, "Woohoo! Something's going wrong. This is awesome. God is up to something. Yahoo! So when troubles come your way, God says, do a woohoo! Let's try that one. Woohoo! When troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Why? Why? Verse 3 goes on to say, "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow, and so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." And so I just very quickly want to unpack 4 fruits, 4 areas that God promises us that we will grow in when we march face first into the difficulties that life throws at us. So first of all, when we face our troubles, when we joyously face our troubles as opportunities, we're told that our trust in God grows. So let's say our trust in God grows. Our trust in God grows. Verses 2 and 3, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy, for you know that when your faith is tested." Say, faith is tested. Okay, so in these words, faith is tested, it really means our faith is proven. Say, proven. Our faith is proven. I think many of us would read a verse like this and we think of our faith being tested as God's way of like poking holes. Like, all right, here's a difficulty in their life. Let's see what they've got. right? And he's just wanting to poke holes in our faith. Does anybody identify with that? Your faith is tested. You're going to fail, you miserable student, you. Right? But that is not the implication of the words here. The implication is that God uses difficulties in our life to prove what is there, to prove that he is there, right? And that he's made himself available to us in greater measure than we realized. And that he's made himself available, he's made available to us a greater experience of his person, of his presence in the midst of that difficulty. He's not out to beat us down in our difficulties. He's out to show us how much more present he is for us. Does that make sense? You know, the analogy that was going through my mind as I was prepping this is this picture of a lighthouse, standing in, against the gales, against the hurricanes, and the winds are blowing, and right, the waves are just crashing against it. The strength of the lighthouse, or I should say the strength of the foundation of the lighthouse, is not proven on a sunny day when there's no wind. Right? That proves nothing about what is really there for the lighthouse. But it's in the storms, it's in the troubles, it's in the hurricanes of life that the lighthouse comes to realize, I'm on a solid foundation. Look at what's beneath me. And I think that's the picture that can serve you in the troubles of time, the testing of in troubled times, the testing of your faith is God wanting to show you how strong he is, how present he is on your behalf. And so God's payoff then for pressing into troubles is our trust in him, our awareness of his person, our awareness of his presence grows. All right. So let me just ask you this question. What would it look like for you in the midst of this thing that you wrote down? What would it look like for you to discover God's more powerful presence in the midst of facing it? Just take a moment to think about that. What would it look like for your faith to be proven, for him to prove himself, for your trust to be proven? By facing this. All right, so secondly, when we face our troubles as opportunity, we're told that our sticking power grows. That was in verse 3. When your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. Our endurance grows when we face difficulties. That means our patience increases when we head face first into the storms of life, in the power and the presence of the Lord, in the provision of the Lord. Our sticking power, our long suffering increases for the next storm. Let me say that again. Our sticking power for the next storm grows stronger as we stand face first into this storm. Make sense? Right? So again, it's just like exercising this muscle of faith and trust in God's presence when life gets difficult. Right? When we press through the pain, the muscle increases. Our sticking power, our stamina increases when we face the problems. All right, so that's God's payoff. And so again, think of what you've got written on the blue card, this thing that you're ignoring. What would it look like for you to face this problem and find that your sticking power relationally, your sticking power spiritually, your trust in God, for that to be growing as you face this? All right, and thirdly, when we face our troubles as opportunities, our maturity grows. So verse 4 says this, when your endurance is fully developed, when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete. And so this is actually describing a process, and when we get to the end of the process, which we will get there probably by the time we die. So between now and then, it's a process of becoming more enduring, becoming more perfect, becoming more complete. All right, and so the word perfect here means maturity. All right, and the word complete just means in every way. And so when we're facing difficulties, when we're facing problems, when we're stepping into hard conversations, when we're addressing the things that God is putting a finger on in our hearts, this verse tells us that when we're doing that, we are maturing in every way. We are becoming perfect and complete in every way. We mature emotionally, right? When we step into the difficulties, we mature relationally when we don't ignore those problems. We mature spiritually when we step into those problems. And as I said before, if we ignore the problems, conversely, if we ignore the problems, this verse says that our endurance becomes, instead of fully developed, our endurance becomes underdeveloped. Right? We just have no stamina for difficulties, and our stamina for difficulties decreases as we ignore difficulties. Make sense? We become underdeveloped, and we become imperfect. Right? Isn't that what the verse would say? When you don't face difficulties, your endurance becomes underdeveloped, and you will be imperfect and incomplete in every way. Who wants that? Yeah, none of us, right? Of course. So how do we not become that? We step face first into our troubles with great joy, trusting in God's presence and his provision. All right, so God's payoff for facing troubles as opportunities as our maturity grows. And so again, what would it look like as you step headfirst into this storm? What would it look like for you to find yourself maturing in every way? Lastly, when we face our troubles as opportunities, the Bible tells us our provision grows. Kind of talked about this almost by implication with the first point, but verse 4 goes on to conclude with these words, when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Say, needing nothing. All right, so the words needing nothing here, these words do not mean that we have no needs, right? I don't have any needs. There's nothing I need. That's not the implication here, that when we're maturing as we face problems. What this is saying, the implication is it means that we lack nothing as we walk in God's presence, as we walk in God's provision, when we march headfirst into those problems. There's absolutely nothing we lack in him. Does that make sense? We are never shortchanged of what we're going to need to face that difficulty when we face it in him. We lack nothing. We become more mature, needing nothing, wanting nothing, lacking nothing. God uses difficulties in our lives to demonstrate his presence in us, his power in us, his power for us, his power through us, his provision to us, his provision through us, and to show us that it's all greater than we realized had we just lived our lives in this milquetoast, everything is hunky-dory, sunshiny, tiptoe through the tulips, right? It's only in the storms that we find everything I need is in him. It's in him. So God's payoff for facing our troubles And facing them as opportunities is our provision grows. And so again, as you consider this storm you're ignoring, or at least you've been ignoring up till now, all right, what would it look like for you to discover God's provision is sufficient for this? Everything you need is in Him for this. What would that look like? I mean, in Christ, these things are never loses. Never. Does that make sense? It's never a lose. God always has a way forward. His provision is never, ever, ever lacking, regardless of how it goes down. Does that make sense? We lack nothing. What would it look like for you to discover that? You know, have the worship team come forward at this time. I want to close with this story. I kind of wasn't certain if I would share this, but when Leanna and I were in seminary, we were living in the Chicago area, and Leanna was actually managing a dental office at the time, and one of the hygienists there was married to a man who was an importer for liquors, fine wines and stuff that were manufactured around the world or produced around the world. And one of his jobs was a great job. He just traveled around the nicest restaurants in the Chicago area, inviting the guys who own these vineyards or whatever, and he put on dinners, wine tasting dinners for the movers and shakers in the Chicago restaurant industry. Well, it just so happened that one evening, he was at a 5-star French restaurant, which is just a couple blocks from Leanna's and my apartment. And you need to understand, we're in seminary at the time, and we're so poor. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, as the old saying is. But he calls us hey, I'm 2 blocks down. There's a nice dinner. It's a wine tasting for this French vineyard. The owner from France is here. I had 2 restaurant owners not show up. I got 2 extra seats. Put on some nice clothes and come on and have a nice French dinner, which we did. We didn't have any nice clothes, so we have to pretend, as 23-year-olds or however old we were, 25-year-olds, that we're movers and shakers in the Chicago restaurant industry, which it was a great, great, great evening because the food was amazing. French restaurant. And this is just kind of a footnote of the story. It just so happens at the time I was reading the essays of a French philosopher, Michel de Montaigne, who just so happened to be from this area of France where this vineyard was. And so when the owner of this French vineyard is making his way around schmoozing all these restaurant owners in Chicago, he stops at our table, and I'm I noticed you're from the Montaigne area of France. Are you familiar with the writings of Michel de Montaigne? And he's you know the writings of... I don't have a French accent. He sounded kind of Spanish, I think, there for a second, actually. But he's you know the writings of Michel de Montaigne? I was well, yeah. He's do all Americans read Michel de Montaigne? I was I think we do, right? No. And so, I'm not joking, he sat down at Leanna's and my table and wasted opportunities to sell wine to people with money on 2 poor seminary students who couldn't even afford 1 bottle of his wine. And he just wanted to talk about Michel de Montaigne. He says, when you come to France, you must stay at my vineyard. It was a wonderful, wonderful evening. All right. Why did I tell you that story? What he told us in that conversation was amazing. It pertains to this. He said, when grapes are spoiled, when they have sunshine, when they have just the perfect amount of water, when the soil is perfect, it produces useless wine. It has no flavor. Nobody likes spoiled grapes. Right? He said the best wine is wine where the grapes have had to press through difficulty. When the weather was stormy, when it was dry, when the ground is sandy, right? When it's rocky, when the sun beats down on it, because the grapes become rich from having fought its way through the storms and the droughts of life. Does that make sense? All right. Who wants to be a worthless wine with your life, right? None of us. None of us. And so let's press in to the difficulties that are before us with great joy, because God promises, hey, you're going to find me more present, and you're going to mature in every single way, and you're going to become stronger, and your stamina and your endurance is going to increase, and moreover, you're going to find that I'm going to give you what you need to persevere. All right, makes sense? So here's what I want you to do. Worship team is going to lead us in a response song in just a moment. But what I'm going to invite you to do is, on the flip side of your card, on one side is the problem you're ignoring. I want you to write down one step that you will take in the next 24 to 48 hours to step into the storm. Just one step to face this thing that you've been ignoring.